Well, Erica, thanks so much for taking some time to join me today. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you so much for thinking of me.
Yeah. So you've got this book that has just come out, and I'd never even heard of this word before. And if I say it wrong, my apologies to the nation of France. Um, so what is flaneuring, and how did you become interested in it?
Sure. So flaneuring, it's one of those words, and I think of it a lot like the word hygge, that Scandinavian term of being cozy. Everybody knows what it feels like, but they hear the word. They're like, what is that? What does that mean? What planet does it come from? Flaneuring, I think, is very similar. And I think it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, which is one of the first things that drew me to it. For me, flaneuring is very much about getting out of my head. It's about walking without intent, not having a destination in mind, which for somebody who is busy, we're all busy, it's hard to do that. So it's kind of a special act to me. It's part of my, if you want to call it, self-care routine. And I was first drawn to it through travel. It was definitely trying to experience places in a different way, in a way that felt genuine to me. And my immediate response when I'm looking for an authentic experience is to become part of the wallpaper and just watch.
Sure.
It's a task that doesn't ask much of you. It just asks you to exist in a space.
And so when did you actually hear the word? Like when were you introduced to it?
Sure. So there's a really great book that I knew about before I started working on this with Simon Schuster, Simon and Schuster, and it's called Flaneurs, and it's by a woman named Lauren Elkin. It is a wonderful book about her own experience in traveling around the world and using flaneuring as almost a form of therapy for her. And that's the first time I had heard about it. And it really opened my mind to all of the different things that flaneuring could mean to somebody. For me, it was purely, a physical escape, mental escape too, in the fact that you're not asking anything of your brain, but she was using it as a very active way to, get through some tough stuff in her life, and also, journaling about that experience, which I think is pretty powerful.
And in your book, you reference obviously her work and some of the
Hmm.
the history of flaneuring,
Sure.
which man, I was really interested
Yeah.
in that. So break it down of where this kind of came from, who was involved with it, and even who wasn't supposed to be involved in it.
Sure. So if you look back, there are histories of flaneurs, all by different types of names as well. Dandies, I think, would also play into that, the English dandies. But the original flaneurs, turn of the century France, it was a group of men who were seen as highly intellectual. They were going on long walks, gathering observations and, different elements of what was going on around them to create poetry, for party talk, for artwork, for essays, anything they were working on. The tough part about that is usually women were not included in this group. So to call a woman a flaneur was not a nice thing to call that particular woman. The idea was she was a lady of the night. So
Oh, yes.
yeah, yeah. So that was something I really tried to address in the book, that flaneuring is for everybody. It's for men, it's for women. If you're, in a wheelchair, there's a certain way that you can flaneur and explore a place in that way as well. Driving, if you live in the middle of the Midwest where I grew up, and walking down a highway is not good for your health, or, it's too cold to get out and walk, I think there's a way to do it as well while you're driving.
Now, what I think is interesting when we talk about walking, because we are talking about walking, not that it can't be done, like you said, in a car or in a wheelchair or, some other
Mm-hmm.
form of transportation, is that in my area in Southern California, most people walk for one reason, and that's to walk the dog. Like
Mm-hmm.
that, that's what people
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
walk the dog.
Sure.
Obviously, some people are runners and everything, but I see lots of people in the afternoons, or evenings walking their dog. Um, when you think of your, I guess, your experiences overseas, traveling in an international space, take me through, like, you arrive, you land, you
Mm-hmm.
go to your Airbnb or hotel or whatever it is. What are your next thoughts in terms of how you're going to explore that area or that city?
Sure. So whenever I plan a trip, I used to be just type A. I had to have every hour plan something to do, something to Instagram. I was very much that kind of traveler, and I'm very thankful that I've, migrated away from that. But a lot of that work comes in, I think, ahead of time. And it's what are the important things that I want to do? And I'll plan those for maybe a day. And I leave certain days completely open. So I go to Iceland once a year. I really love that space. And I think it's an amazing country to flaneur in as well. And to use that as an explicit example here, I would get there, I would choose an area that I've been interested in, whether it's in Reykjavik for a certain reason of people watching, or if it's, in Thingvellir National Park for the sake of really interesting geography, or a pretty rock lava formation, whatever,
Sure.
something that I want to see. So that is my main driver. I'll find something that inspires me, usually through the landscape, and I'll just go. It's tough because a lot of the times when I'm traveling, it does require a little bit of driving to get there. And that I know is a little bit against the ideology of flaneuring. But once you get there, just make a very clear intent to not think about which direction you're going in. Granted, it depends where you are, and some safety plays into that. There are a lot of really deep crevices and ridges in Iceland that you don't want to be falling down.
Sure,
So
sure.
I love flaneuring with a friend as well, and I think it's a really fun thing to do, to experience a place with someone you love without any kind of agenda on your mind. So I give myself an afternoon, and when I start to get hungry, I'll head back to the car. I'll head back to a spot that looked particularly enticing on my walk, and I'll just spend some time thinking about what I just saw. I usually don't write about it, which is kind of interesting. And considering I do so much writing, journaling about my flaneuring is not usually a thing I do.
But you talk about that in the book, though,
Mhm.
that a
Yeah.
lot of you suggest that that's a
Mhm.
possibility.
I
What are
have a
some of
lot
the
of friends who do it and love it, but it just says it doesn't stick with me all the time. It has to be the right mood.
yeah, this word sounds so upscale, so rich, so lavish, so luxurious. Like, what are you doing today, honey? I'm gonna go flaneuring. It's like, what? Like, it
Yeah.
just like, do you get pushback on that, or does it like, no, this is kind of hoity-toity kind of thing?
It's become my dad's new favorite word. He loves to drop it in whenever he can on phone conversations, which I think is wonderful. But I haven't had any pushback in terms of it being hoity-toity. I agree with you. It is a very fancy word. I think, and I would argue, we were talking a little bit about the word hygge too. That's one, well, that's more of a silly sounding word versus fancy, but it's one that catches people's attention. A lot of people have mentioned that they've heard of it before, but had no idea what it is, and are a little delighted when I explain it, and they realize it's something that they've probably been doing most of their life. I think that the level of how relatable it is, once they give me a chance to explain, helps.
Sure, sure.
Hmm.
Okay, let's talk about the benefits. You've
Sure.
mentioned these a little bit, but I want to be explicit
Hmm.
about what are some of the benefits here.
Yeah. So again, I think it really depends on the person. For me personally, and that's what I can really speak to, is I find that the moment I decide to take a walk, go on a flaneuring session, it's not like a weight is off my shoulders, but I'm usually sitting at my desk with my shoulders around my ears, that kind of level. It just drops. Everything drops a little bit. It's for me just giving myself the approval to go do something that is good for my brain and not necessarily productive for much else in today's working world.
Hmm.
It's not sending an email, it's not texting someone back, it's just taking me time. So I think that's a really important thing to have in your day to day. And I've spoken with a couple of people in the book too who chatted about the benefits of meditation and walking meditation specifically. And I think that this does play into that. I've worked through many issues on my flaneurs, just whatever's happening in life, work through a tough work issue. It's not necessarily intending to head one direction physically, but it is working through something in my brain and the different
Hmm.
scenarios. And there's always the physical aspect of it as well. I think walking is amazing if you can do it. If you have the time to do it, the ability to do it, it's good to just get outside and have some fresh air.
Hmm. I loved all the different perspectives that you interwove in the book in terms of you
Mhm.
interviewing people that you knew in your own life and
Mhm.
others that that what their experience was. That was very fun to hear from others. Um, so let's say that I want to get started with this. Maybe I've
Mhm.
done it a little bit my whole life. I'm not going on an international trip anytime soon.
Sure.
How can I test the waters? How can I jump in here?
Yeah. When I first moved to New York, and I think it does help when you're in a new city, although I will argue that whenever I travel back to Wisconsin, where my parents live, I rediscover my hometown in all kinds of ways just from walking around. It is, it's so different to experience a place in person, feeling the cold air on your face, smelling a certain smell in a certain part of town versus being in your car listening
Oh,
to, music that just transports you somewhere else.
it is so
And
different. Just
so
to
different.
interrupt here real quick,
Yeah, yeah,
I went with my wife and daughter to walk our dog last Saturday.
sure.
And our daughter doesn't usually join us. She's 20 and she's at college, and so she joined us. And she said, "Wow, I never even noticed all of these things. We were pointing out all these things,
Right.
and it's the streets that we drive every single
Sure.
day,
Mhm.
from the flowers to the dogs to the, the fences. I mean, it's not like revolutionary things,
No.
but they're very interesting."
Oh, flowers. That is something I notice every time I walk. Even in my neighborhood just down the street that I live on, how they change. My neighbor, I love my neighbors in the building next to us, but they cannot keep a plant alive. So I love seeing the different plants that they, incorporate into their stoop area. It's pretty fun. I have to ask, what kind of dog do you have? I love dogs.
Well, our dog, her name is Lexi,
Let's see. Okay.
officially Lexington, but my
Yeah.
family said
Oh,
too
nice.
much. And she is 12 years old, and I think she's like half terrier, half
Uh,
dachshund,
sure.
and at Lexington Trotter on Instagram.
Oh,
We don't post very often, but
love it.
yeah, no, she's great.
Yeah, I think dog walking is an incredible way to flaneur as
Do
well.
you have a dog?
Um, I don't, but I grew up with a border collie black lab mix we loved named Spot. He was wonderful. He was hard to walk because if you gave him a little bit of leeway, he would bolt, and he was strong. So I don't
Yeah.
know if I would ever go flaneuring with Spot if he were still around, to be honest. But
The problem is dogs love to flaneur. That's the problem.
and if you want to let them take the reins, that's honestly a great way to start. And the one thing that my friends have told me is, I can't get my mind to shut off. I can't tell myself not to choose where I'm going, which is so hard. And I respect that. And I have a lot of trouble with that depending on the day. And I think one thing that I chat about in the book, and it's potentially one of my favorite elements, is the idea of flaneuring games. Matt Sosin, who I spoke to, and he's quoted in the book, introduced this idea to me. And it's very simple. It's walking around and setting maybe one rule to keep your brain busy. So if I see someone in a red jacket, I'm going to take a left turn. And that's it. You just go around. It's definitely better done in a cityscape as opposed to out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah,
But I
I
do
might be
find
walking
myself
forever if
that.
I ever try to wait for somebody in a red jacket.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So maybe, customize it to your location. But yeah, that's something that I'll pull out if I find myself, you know, I'll walk down a street and be like, oh, I remember this amazing cafe down this way. Maybe I should stop by. I'm like, no, don't do that. Pick a color jacket and you're just going to follow, that color wherever you see it, or even just in general, a color. I think that's a good way to start, especially for people who aren't traveling anytime soon. I think it's something anybody can do. It's not just an international activity by any means. As I was mentioning, when I first moved to New York, I had no money, as many other people who first moved to New York. So I would put $20 in my pocket and I would get off the train somewhere in a neighborhood I had never been, and I would have enough for lunch and maybe something else. And I would just wander and explore. And that has brought a whole new depth to the city for me. And I think I would have left years ago had I not done something like that.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
One of the things in the book that really intrigued me is your expansion of the concept of flaneuring beyond just physical walking.
Mhm.
You talked about in the workplace, via computer, some other ways. Would you mind expanding that concept for us? So we've got the kind of walking, you know, not aimlessly, but how would you, what's the, like a short definition, would you say? Walking with intention or
I would say walking without intent.
without intent? There we go.
Yeah, or letting the route take you somewhere. That's how I've described it to other people. Just,
Yeah,
yeah, giving into a route as opposed to planning it yourself.
sure. I don't
Mhm.
know why this comes to my mind, but when I was growing up, malls were a thing. Malls are not really much of
Oh,
a thing,
yes. Yeah.
now, but back in the 80s, 90s. And we would go to the mall, and my dad would be like, stay to the right. We got to stay to the right. You just stay to the right the whole way. And
That is kind of funny.
you could not cross over to the other side,
Mhm.
as a family. It was like, no, we're just going to stay to the right and go the whole way. I've got that ingrained in my head, Erica, stay to the right.
That actually, yeah, that sounds about right to me as well. Janesville Mall, that's the closest mall we had to me growing up in my family. It also reminds me, you say stay to the right, and I have this automatic traumatic memory of being on the wrong side of an escalator in New York City when people are trying to get by. Because they will just push you. They'll push you around if you're standing, on the left-hand side and they need to get down or up. So yeah,
Yeah.
I feel you.
All right. So
Mhm.
let's expand this idea of flaneuring for people beyond just walking. What are some of the other
Okay.
ways that we can explore without intent?
Yeah, so I think there's a chapter all about flaneuring at work. And that was the hardest chapter that I had to work on just because flaneuring outside was so familiar to me. Getting outside, walking around, walking on the weekends, walking with friends, that was something I knew very well. And as I was writing this, having a full-time job and working on this book, it's funny and counterintuitive how much stress there was going on for a book that is supposed to be all about getting rid of some stress.
Yeah.
And it forced me to figure out different ways to act on that flaneuring promise while I was doing my daily work. So one that I really love and I do almost every day is I call it cyber flaneuring, and it's Google Earth based. So picking a location, and usually I'll choose different areas of Scandinavia just because I have really big interest in the geography there. But can't be anywhere, just drop a pin, whatever, somewhere on the planet and zoom in to the Google Earth view and just take a look at what's around. Take 10, 15 minutes. I promise it will take you out of whatever headspace to a small extent, to a big extent, help you clear a little bit. I think that's been a really powerful one that I've practiced and learned about. And it was actually the suggestion of a friend who was like, oh, do you ever spend time on Google Earth? And it was like a light bulb went off. I'm like, wait a second. That's a great way to explore the world without even going outside, if it's the middle of winter or
And
something.
for people who haven't done that, that's not just an overhead view. You can actually
Mhm.
go onto the street view and literally walk the streets of the world.
Paris, Hong Kong, wherever you want to go. It's amazing. And sometimes I do like to go to places I've already been just to start off. Maybe it's a street in Reykjavik, maybe it's, somewhere in Lisbon, but then you'll find yourself kind of zooming out and piecing together, oh, I know where this is, but what is over here? What is here? And I feel like it's a really good brain activity. It's very creative. So it's been an important part of that. And the one I mentioned earlier too, that was interesting was flaneuring while you're driving. It sounds dangerous because the whole idea is that you don't have a route in mind and you're just giving in, which is the exact opposite of what you should be doing while you're driving. But growing up in the Midwest, we did a lot of Sunday drives,
Go out for a
especially
drive.
yeah, yeah, especially when it was too hot to do anything else. My dad would entice us with dollar ice cream cones from McDonald's, and then we would just go on a drive while we ate that ice cream. And it's something that I've been doing, and I didn't realize that not everyone really does this. Whenever I go back home, I'll ask to borrow the car, which is a thing I have to do now again, which is so funny to me. I feel like I'm 16. And I'll take a drive around the lake that we live near. And the lake is just a destination. It's like go down a road I've never been down. Whatever it may be, whatever looks interesting. Sometimes there are new roads, which is always fun to explore. And that I see as a way of flaneuring as well. You're expanding your mind map of a place that you're very familiar with, but you're experiencing it in a different way. Maybe it's the light of the day is different than the last time you remember, or maybe the last time you were there, you were 14 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it's been a really beautiful way to rediscover a special place.
That's pretty much how I drive. And that's
Yeah.
why my wife drives everywhere. Like if we
Mhm.
go somewhere, she's the one driving because
Yeah,
she does not want us to take forever to get there. Cause I'm like, I think
sure.
it's over here. We'll just kind of go this direction,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. My
It,
boyfriend is very similar. He's a photographer and he loves taking candid shots, which I support. But if we're trying to get to a certain place by a certain time, it's not going to. He also picked up Ikebana, the Japanese art of floral arrangement, which I love. But now he likes to stop and look at different plants that he could potentially take a branch from, which I also support. But, I just stand back and I watch it happen. I'm like, this is flaneuring. You are the ultimate flaneur.
yeah. And we're late. Hurry up.
Yeah, yeah.
Quit flaneuring.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty funny. You say that out
Yeah.
in public kind of loud.
Yeah.
So if and I am a pretty focus driven person, and
Mhm,
so a lot of what you're talking about feels like a total waste of time. I mean, a
mhm.
total waste of time. What I mean, why am I doing this? Talk me into it. If I'm a type A person, like you've
Sure.
already given me some great benefits, but I don't know. I get those benefits by going to get a massage or going to meditate or whatever. Talk me into wandering aimlessly.
Sure. So you mentioned getting a massage and going to meditate. I think this is actually the easiest possible way. And I mentioned it's a part of my self-care routine, and I think it is a part of many other people's, whether you want to call it that or something else. It's free. It's a free thing to do. It's friendly for all budgets, which I really truly do love. I do believe that anybody can do it. It's tough when you look at the experience of me versus the experience of maybe a young Black woman who wants to have a similar intent of going out and walk. It's a different type of thing that you have to approach in terms of safety. But you know, anybody can be doing this. It's budget friendly. Um, it is a waste of time, but I think that there's some beauty in that with how productive everybody is nowadays and how connected we are. Our eyes are glued to screens, which I feel the effect of that. I know that I stare at screens more than others probably do, but I talk to my parents and they also feel the effect of that. So I think that just getting outside and re-experiencing a familiar space and adding depth to your experience and how you interact and how you appreciate the different things in your life, you could definitely argue that it is a waste of time. But I think after doing it for a month or just even a couple of weeks, just noticing the first time that something looks a little bit different than you remembered is pretty delightful.
And I would add that um, kids are natural flaneurs. Like they
Oh,
just
yeah.
explore.
Hmm.
My kids are older now, so they're not as much into that. But we will sometimes take a trip to Los Angeles and it's like, oh, we're going to just go take pictures or explore or find a restaurant or, we have no destination necessarily.
Hmm.
It's just driving and exploring and seeing things that we've never seen before. But kids have a natural tendency to do that. And I think if we allowed our kids to kind of lead the way in the same way that you even talked about our pets leading the way,
Hmm.
there's this natural
Hmm.
exploration and curiosity. And really, a lot of what you're talking about too is curiosity. It's cultivating
Yeah.
a curiosity that ultimately I think would benefit us in the workplace.
Mhm.
It benefits it also it also expands my mind to other cultures or ways that people live because I'll walk by someone's house or drive by and if I'm noticing I'm like, oh, interesting, look at how they've got that. I would never do that. But that's like if I come in from a place of non-judgment, right, just of a place of
Yeah.
curiosity, a place of
Yeah.
seeking to understand without ever really talking to them, but just seeing it. It seems like that curiosity, it creates space in my brain. It creates curiosity that I can bring back into my work to not feel like, okay, I've always done it this way. Like I've
Hmm.
always thought about this thing this way. I've always done this task this way. I've always connected with this person this way. Is it possible that, this wondering, Wandering,
Hmm.
right, creates space for more curiosity in the workplace? That's what
Yeah.
I'm thinking.
Of course. Yeah. There are so many times, and I find myself taking just laps around the building here at work and staring out the window or just standing in front of a window and watching people pass below, because I've had to leave my desk because I'm frustrated with something and I come back and I can solve it or figure it out or create a better presentation or something around those lines just from taking a quick little break.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
I enjoyed the book. I really did. And I thought
I'm
it was
glad.
so fascinating how it expanded my mindset of something that is pretty simple, right? It's a pretty simple
Hmm.
concept, but it really expanded it to encourage me to think about it in a more holistic way. So
Hmm.
I do want to encourage people, you should get the book and it's on Kindle. Is it on audiobook yet? Maybe?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it should be available through Amazon, I believe. Yeah.
Fancy.
Hmm.
The Art of Flaneuring, How to Wonder with Intention and Discover a Better Life. And you write all over the place too, like
Hmm.
other places you write. And so if people want to read your articles, what's the best way for them to kind of go and check those out?
Sure. Yeah, I'm always promoting them on my Instagram, which is just Erika Ray Owen, Erica with a K. It's ErikaRaeowen. But also my personal website, which is just my full name.com, has a link as well with all of those. It's a lot of Iceland stories, so
A
they're good
lot of
for
Iceland stories. My
that.
goodness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
Good. Well, we'll obviously have all of that in the show notes. So, Erica, it's so great to meet you. Do you have another book in the works? Any thoughts? Not that you have to, but do you have anything coming?
Yeah, there are two things I'm working on. There's one more that I'm working on with Simon and Schuster that should be out, I'd say like fall 2021. That's around, you know, it's called Law Breaking Ladies is the working title, and it's biographies of various rebellious women, so female pirates, female mafia leaders, crime lords, that kind of thing. Just very straightforward biographies and illustrations. It's pretty fun so far. So
Female
yeah.
flaneurs.
Yeah, there might be some of those in there. I haven't come across any yet, but I'm sure.
Could be you. You
It
could
could
write
be
about
me.
yourself then.
Could be me.
Yeah.
The prerequisite is that they have to have been arrested. So we'll see. We'll see what
Whoa.
happens. Yeah, at some point.
We could arrange that somehow.
Yeah.
I could call you in. We've got a
Yeah,
shady
wasn't
character walking down 19th Street.
it? Wasn't Jane Fonda? She was just arrested, right? It can't be too hard.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Erica. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.